Hey everyone, welcome. This is Dr. Jason Peep. Dr. Ketone, also chiropractor extraordinaire, bringing you education, information, motivation, inspiration on the regular. This is our second podcast, number 2 episode. So strap in. Hopefully you saw last week's episode. We talked about the immune system and about what that means to actually, when it comes between germ theory and what truly is terrain theory. But today we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about ketones. So they don't call me Dr. Ketone for nothing because it is one of my specialties. And, you know, I kind of, for those of you who have followed me on Facebook over the years, you've seen I've had many, many videos and we've done a lot on ketones, the ketogenic diet, ketosis, what it is. And we're going to go into all that today a little bit, give you a little keto 101. But, you know, I made my bread and butter and explaining things in ways that people never heard when it came to the ketogenic lifestyle, help people who are struggling to actually get great results. And really the health and science behind how it can be helpful. So buckle up, campers. We're ready to go. But as always, definitely, hopefully you saw the disclaimer early on. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor, most likely. So understand I'm not diagnosing, treating, curing, any of those kinds of things. Everything I tell you is information. It's based on science, but it is not me telling you what to go out there and do. Always consult with your personal physician. If you'd like to see me, you're more than welcome to. You can reach out at some of the contact information below. And as always, if you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. Share this out, right? Sharing is caring. So if you think this is valuable and you want to help us out, definitely share this with other people, get them to watch. And I made a new one up. Subscribing is vibing. So basically, if you're really getting the good vibe, you want to subscribe and get more of this content, here we go. If you think that's really silly what I just said, feel free to let us know and I'll ignore it anyway. So here we go. So ketones. A lot of people, they've heard of the ketogenic diet, or they may have heard of ketones, but maybe they don't know enough about it, or they've done it and failed. And we're going to talk about some of those pitfalls and really how it all works. So the first thing we really want to talk about is, what is a ketone? People say, well, all right, that's great. I want ketosis. I want to burn fat. What is a ketone? So we have 2 fuels. One is glucose. Most people know what glucose is. Talk about it as blood sugar, if you will. The other are ketones. So our body uses both as fuel, and both are used to make energy in the body. We use something called ATP. That is the currency of energy in the body. So when the body breaks down carbs and most protein, it makes glucose. When it breaks down fat, it'll make ketones. And like I said, both are forms of fuel. So when your body is burning glucose and burning ketones, it is using that to make the energy in the body. It makes all the systems go around. That's what ATP does. Now, ketones are a more efficient, cleaner burning energy source than glucose. And we'll kind of break down how that is. And if it wasn't for ketones, we wouldn't be here as a species. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So ketones are this fuel source the body has. And when you are in what's called ketosis, that's when your body has a higher enough level of ketones in the body and in the blood that you can use it for fuel. So there's what we call nutritional ketosis, where we measure this in millimoles in the blood, where we get anything over like 0.5 to 0.7 millimoles, up to like 2 or 3 range, even higher. But really, I'll tell you, if you're under 1 and you're doing a keto lifestyle, you need to get that a little higher if you want to get the benefit. And we'll talk about what's called keto adaptation as we go forward too. Let me put a little note so I don't forget in my notes here. Okay. So basically our goal with being the keto lifestyle is to get our body into a state of ketosis so that way we can shift our fuel. Now we got to take a step back here and understand these different fuels here, because it's very important to understand why we have them and why we really don't see one as much as we should. So we are hunter-gatherers. That is our genetics. That is how we evolved. All right. Thousands and thousands of generations of hunter-gatherers. How we live now is very short compared to how we evolved. Okay. We didn't live like this, right? Where you can sit around, watch my podcast on your phone while you eat a piece of pizza that you just called to have delivered to your house with your, whatever. All right. We had times of food and not food. So let's talk about glucose. So if glucose was our only fuel, when we didn't have food, we wouldn't have made it as a species. So basically, when you have food and your body's eating, most of the time you are burning glucose for fuel. So you're breaking down the food you're eating, you're using it for fuel, you're putting some in some short-term storage in your muscles and your fat, in your muscles and your liver, a little bit of circulating blood. And the excess stuff usually gets shuttled into storage because one day, which is fat, which one day we may need. We'll come back to that. So imagine, though, that all you have was glucose and no storage, which is ketones, no fat. So you run out of food one day. All right, well, your body breaks down its glucose that it has locally available, right? We pull it out of our liver, we pull it out of our muscle stores, and then whatever's circulating. That's only about 2,500 calories. After that, your body's like, well, we're kind of out of glucose. We better make more. So we're going to go and pull it from something. Well, we don't really eating carbs. We don't have food coming in. So we got to pull it from places in our body. And like I said earlier, protein is a good source of glucose when your body's running out of glucose from carbohydrates. Now, I didn't say it was something we want, but it is a source that it'll go for. So if it reaches for your protein source, the biggest source of protein in your body is your muscle, right? And there's circulating immunoglobulins and things like that. But your body will scavenge some of that too. We'll talk about fasting and autophagy later. But it will start pulling from your muscle tissue. And over time, if there's no alternative fuel source, it keeps burning muscle. And eventually what happens is you lose so much muscle that when the food's available, you can't go get it because you have nothing left. And or you lose so much muscle mass that you die. It's called sarcopenia. If you lose more than about 50% of your body mass in muscle, you cease to exist. And your brain, this thing here, uses more fuel than anything else, right? So it uses a ton of glucose stores. All right. When you don't have fuel, this is not going to work very well. So you can understand that if we didn't have anything else besides glucose as our fuel source, we wouldn't have survived as a species. We had to adapt. And then the adaptogenic qualities, we had a different fuel source when we didn't have food called ketones. So you're eating food, and then all of a sudden we run out of food. So we're starving, right? So the body goes, oh, let's burn through our normal stores of glucose. That takes maybe a day or two at tops, 2,500 calories. And then it goes, all right, maybe we'll break down a tiny little bit of muscle, not very long. We'll break down the protein, but the food doesn't come in. We got to shift over. We got to start burning that fat. So remember, we talked before, when your body's getting glucose in, right, it uses some for energy. It puts some in short-term storage, and the rest gets put in long-term storage for that cold winter. Winter is coming, right? That's that Game of Thrones, but it's the real deal. So when the food becomes scarce, the body goes, all right, switch sources. Let's go pull out from our fat ketones. So our body starts taking our fat and breaking it down, metabolizing that fat, fatty acid oxidation in our liver, and starts to give us our body some things called ketones. Specifically, we're going to talk about one ketone called beta hydroxybutyrate. Puts that in our blood, then that goes into our cells and starts running the energy systems. Now, here's the cool thing about that, right? Glucose needs a friend to get in the cell. It needs insulin. So as your blood sugar rises, your body increases your insulin. The insulin goes and tells the cells to pull the glucose from the blood into the cell. Cell then metabolizes it to make energy, ATP, and off you go. Ketones don't need a friend. The body sees them and can then bring them in, metabolize them, and make energy, right? So we are hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers spent about 70% of the time burning fuel for fat fuel, ketones. 30% of the time burning glucose. But nowadays, because we eat carbs and we don't starve, we see glucose 98% of the time. Minimally do we see ketones. So our body kind of shifts in its fuel burning and is always in storage mode, all right, and almost never sees a ketone anymore and becomes less efficient at it. We'll come back to that. So understand that 1 pound of fat holds about 3,400 to 3,900 calories of energy. So if you have a few pounds of fat on you from the nice healthy summer you had, and the winter comes and you're out of food for a few days, a week, your body has a repository you can pull from and really burn fuel very well. So understand that you only have about, like I said, that 2,500 calories of circulating and short-term storage glucose. The rest has got to come from somewhere else, and it's going to come from your fat. And if you burn 1 or 2 pounds of fat, well, guess what? That's going to last you a while, that energy. And the body also, and that burns that ketones. And ketones are a much more efficient fuel than glucose. And we'll talk about why, because of the time that it was used. So hopefully this all making sense. If it's not, go back, rewatch, because this is some basics of the evolution of how it works and why fasting does what it does, why our body has these two fuels, and even how we can trick ourselves into it. So we have, nowadays, because we eat carbs and we don't starve, we really only have, three ways we can get ketones in our body. We can fast, we can mimic that starvation, if you will. We can do a ketogenic diet where we trick the body into making ketones, even in the presence of food. I'll talk about it. Or we can drink them. The third thing, you actually can take a beta hydroxybutyrate supplement, drink it, and get that into your body a different way. So we'll talk about those three things. But hopefully you understand the evolutionary piece. Now, when you're in a state when there's not a lot of food around, your body has to accommodate for that. And now ketones, again, you get a lot more fuel, a lot more efficient fuel source from fat. Now, here's the cool thing about the difference between glucose and ketones. So glucose is a quick burning fuel, right? You burn through it pretty quickly. And ketones take longer to get started, but once you get going, they're a longer lasting fuel. So if you want to look at building a campfire or cooking a piece of steak on the grill, if you're using a grill and you just take nothing but kindling, so you throw some newspaper in there, right? Light it up. How well are you going to cook a steak? Not very well, right? And even if you were able to, you'd have to be throwing so much kindling in because it burns so quick that you really can't generate enough heat to really cook that steak for you. At least it would take a lot of fuel to do it. The other option is you could throw some coal in there. So coal takes a little bit longer to get started, but once it's going, it gets a nice steady stream of energy, steady stream of burning of that to keep cooking, if you will, and then we can cook that steak. It's a long-lasting, steady fuel source. In between is your protein, where we can talk about maybe like a log. It takes a little bit more to get going. The kindling can get it moving, but again, you don't want to burn through that protein. So really, ketones are a better fuel state that keeps you here more. So a lot of times when we're burning glucose, we see this happen. Spike, crash, spike, crash. And what happens when you go up, great. And then when you come down, you get tired and your body goes, oh, I need more fuel. And when the body tells you it needs more fuel, guess what? You get hungry. Okay, the number one biological reason why we get hungry is that we're looking for fuel. There are other reasons too, looking for cofactors and looking for building blocks, but the number one reason is looking for fuel. So spike, crash, hungry, hungry, hungry. So glucose burners are looking for fuel more often because it burns quicker. Ketones, when you're burning fat for fuel, you're not looking for fuel very often. You're pretty sated for hours. So think about that too. You're that hunter-gatherer, you're ready to have food, you're looking for something to eat. There's nothing there. Well, your body's got a fuel source that'll keep you going, but also maintain you at a steady level for a while where you're not peaking and crashing, right? We have seen in studies too. Now, again, there's a lot of research out there, and especially in the last 15 years. But if you type in ketones, and you can find many, many ways of how ketones can help. And I'll tell people that you'll see all these things about ketones and helping with insulin resistance and energy and seizure disorders and inflammation and sleep and all these things and thyroid and all these things that can help with, right? Hormones. But at the end of the day, it's not, I don't want to call it this miracle thing. What it is just us going back to who we are, right? The more we separate from how we developed and evolved over thousands and thousands of generations, the more we develop problems, right? The more our bodies don't adapt, we'll just keep adapting until they can't adapt anymore, right? As much as it's amazing to live like this and not worry about food and have shelter, and I'm not saying we shouldn't live like this and have all the amenities of modern life, that's not how we developed. And our bodies will not shift that fast to develop to this new life. So our evolution is still our evolution, and we have to, the more we feed our bodies the way we were intended to be, the better we can be, and less things from health will arise. So when you look at these things, well, why are ketones doing all these amazing things? Well, that's because they're more of our natural state 70% of the time. So one of the things we see in the research is that they've noticed with the fasting in the past and things like that too, is that thyroid numbers will come down a little bit. You're like, well, that doesn't sound like a good thing. It sounds like a bad thing. So that runs a basal metabolic rate. But what we find is that, yes, your thyroid numbers, your T3 numbers will drop a little bit. Well, there's a couple reasons for that. Well, first of all, your body's trying to conserve some resources, right? And you need to make these hormones and everything else. But two, your body actually is more sensitive to your thyroid hormone in ketosis than it is when you're using glucose. So what that means is if you're a glucose burner, you actually need more thyroid to maintain healthy basal metabolic rate than you do when you're in ketosis. So, And again, lowering your metabolic rate a little bit in those areas will slow things down a little bit because we don't need to be burning at that same level when we're in a place where there may not be food. Does that make sense? So just some examples of how this works. It's very interesting stuff. So hopefully this is making some sense. So let's continue here a little bit. Now, when we talk more about, like, well, you're like, all right, well, ketones sound great. Well, how do I get them? What do I do to get them in my body? Well, fasting is one thing we can do. We mimic that starvation phase that we had as hunter-gatherers. And I'm not saying fasting is not good for you, but I don't ever start someone who's a glucose burner, especially if you're eating garbage, fasting tomorrow. It's just not healthy. It's just that their bodies will have a crash. They'll become hypoglycemic. It'll be hard for them to make that transition. They'll get there, but it won't be very fun. The ketogenic diet is where a lot of people come into this. So what is the ketogenic diet? And many of you have heard of it. I mean, years ago, 20 years ago, it came into, or 30 years ago, it was kind of in vogue with Dr. Atkins. And basically all he did was take the keto diet and kind of like, put his own little spin on it. But the keto diet itself has been around for over 100 years. It was developed to help with seizure disorders. That's literally where it came from. We'll talk more about how that works in a minute. But ketones, when we do the ketogenic diet, basically it is this. We have a high fat, low carb, moderate protein diet. So by doing that, by lowering our carbohydrates, our net carbs down to a pretty low number, keeping our fats high and our protein moderate, our body will be forced to shift its fuel. So think about it this way. If I lower your carbs and keep your protein moderate, all right, and then that's all you're eating, your body's going to start going, all right, I'm not getting any carbohydrates in. I can burn a little bit of this protein you give me for fuel, but I'm kind of at a deficit here. I need some other fuel. So by giving it fat, the body says, well, you're giving me this fat. I don't do with it. It learns over time to start breaking it down into fuel. Now, eating fat doesn't make you store fat. Insulin is the storage hormone. Insulin is what turns your carbs into fat. We kind of mentioned that earlier because that's where our storage is. So by having the high fat lifestyle, the body is kind of forced to shift over and go, all right, well, you keep giving me food, but you're actually forced to give me this fat. I know I can kind of break this down and make ketones out of it. All right. And actually burning fuel. And if you do that with a calorie deficit, the body will start also pulling from its own fat stores. So you're kind of cheating the body or kind of hacking. So the body shifts its fuel source burning from glucose to ketones. All right. Now, that's when we talk about macros. So when people talk about macros, just so you know what macros are, macronutrients. Macronutrients are your carbohydrates, your carbs, and your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fats. Okay? The big guys. Micronutrients are little things like your zinc and your magnesium and your iron and your B vitamins. Those are micronutrients, okay? Macros are the big ones. So when people talk about, hey, what are your macros? When we talk about something like a keto diet, it's like, all right, what are those percentages that we like to eat of our calories that will kind of put us into ketosis? So traditionally, I really like to have people are in that 75 to 80% fat, 15 to 20% protein. I'm sorry, 15 to 20% protein and 5% net carbs. We'll talk about net carbs in a minute. Maybe you can get down to about 70% of fat and keeping your protein around 25%. But I will tell you, there are plenty of people who can do a 60% fat or even less. But if you want everyone to succeed, you start here. If you do have 75 to 80% fat with a 15, 20% protein and 5% carbs, almost everyone's getting into ketosis. It's not easy, but you can get there. The more you kind of play with that and start lowering the fat and increasing that protein, you start losing some people along the way. Because not everyone's body functions the same. Everyone's a little bit different. If you already have insulin resistance, it'll be harder for you to get into ketosis than someone who's not. But again, what is insulin resistance? And we'll come back to that in a minute. It's about being exposed to insulin for too long and the body becoming deaf to it. So by shifting your fuel source to a fuel source that is a ketone, not glucose, because glucose needs insulin, ketones do not, guess what happens? Your body stops seeing insulin less and less. It's still having a good source of fuel, and your body can maybe lower its resistance. And we have shown also in the studies have shown that ketones have improved insulin sensitivity, right? So just a little aside there. But that's kind of what we talk about macros. Now, a lot of times you go online to these keto sites and they'll tell you, all right, here, what's your weight, what's your, and it'll say, okay, do these macros, and it'll take your calories from like here to like here. And at the beginning, people forget you are a glucose burner still. Just because you want to be in ketosis doesn't mean you're not a glucose burner anymore. It takes time to shift that fuel. So we don't want to cut your calories too fast, because that's where people have a problem. They'll lose weight for the first couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden they crash because their body's calories come down too quickly. So we definitely want to modulate that slowly, where we don't go too fast down with your calories, and that will come down over time, because your body will become less and less hungry, and we'll have an easier time where we just less and less eat. All right. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So let's break that down. So just so you know, when we talk about the math of it all, we want the percentage of these macros to be in your calories. So if you're a person who we're going to say, if we just make up some numbers here, that you're going to be a 2,000 calorie a day person, at least to start, if we say 75% of those calories need to be fat, all right, so 1,500 calories would be fat. It takes 9 calories per gram of fat. So if you divide 9 into that 1,500, the number you come back out with would be the number of grams you'd have per day, which would be, if I just do it really quick in my head, 660 something grams probably 165 grams of fat. Now, it sounds like a lot, but it's what you need to do. And then if you did 20% protein, 20% of that would be 400 calories divided, and then calories of carbs and protein is about 4 calories per gram. So again, you divide by 4, right? So if you take 20% of 2,000, it'd be 400, and then you divide that by 4, about 100 grams of protein. And of that, your net carbs would be 25 grams. All right. So what is a net carb? Well, because you can look at a food and it says total carbohydrates, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the net carbohydrates. So net carbs are the carbs that hit your body. Basically, there are things that you can eat that are carbohydrates that don't actually get metabolized in your body into making glucose. All right. Some are not. So just because it says, hey, there's 20 total carbs in here and there's 5 grams of sugar, it's not the 5 grams of sugar either. It's about the difference between the total carbs and the amount of fiber. So if you were to look at the package or whatever you're eating and it says, hey, it's 20 grams of total carbohydrates, but there's 10 grams of fiber, you subtract the 10 from the 20, that 10 that you're left with is the net carbs. That's the amount of carbohydrates that will hit your body. And again, we're saying we want to keep our net carbs, in this case, about 25 grams in our example today. So the only other thing you can subtract from your total carbs to actually get your true net carbs are sugar alcohols. So a lot of times they're listed like erythritol, xylitol. They'll be listed 5 grams of, maybe it's 5 grams of sugar alcohol. You can take that out too. So if there's 20 grams of carbs and 10 of it's fiber and then 5 of it's sugar alcohols, the 5 that's left is the amount that actually hits your panel. There is a third thing we're going to talk about called allulose, which is a natural sweetener that unfortunately is listed as a carb, but has no effect on your blood sugar. So some places will list that amount of allulose in there as a net carb, as a carb, and you can subtract that out too. Or sometimes you might do the math on a bar. I've seen these bars that people sell that, some healthier ones, that'll say like, hey, this only has 2 grams of net carbs per bar, but when you do the math with the fiber and the sugar alcohol, you're like, well, I still get 8 grams. And then you find that there's allulose in there, and that's where the other 6 grams come from. So just some things that can make it a little confusing, but things that we can look for. So those are the basics. Now, we're going to talk about macros are just macros, though. And that doesn't tell you about being healthy, though, right? Yeah, you could get into ketosis. You can burn that fat and get to your goal weight and all those kinds of things and lower your insulin resistance. But there's like a clean keto and a dirty keto. And a lot of people do dirty keto. And I'll tell you how I define clean keto. And what that means is, listen, I told you to eat how much fat, how much protein, how much carbs to eat. But I didn't tell you where to get it. So there's a very big difference between going to McDonald's and telling them to have a burger without the bun and being keto versus having a healthy, grass-fed, organic, free-range, grass-finished piece of beef, organic, without a bun and without cheese, things like that make it clean. So to me, a clean keto is you have clean sources of your food, and we stay away from the dairy and the wheat and the soy, which probably comes out like this anyway. So many of you might be like, oh my God, I can't have dairy? That's how I do my keto. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not a fan of dairy. If you've watched my last video, watch all my videos, you'll see that I talk about 3 of the most inflammatory foods you can eat that are most damaging to your gut, allergenic, and affect your system negatively. It's gluten, which is the protein in wheat, dairy, so the proteins in dairy, specifically casein. Whey is not great either, but casein is worse, and soy. Right, and corn you can throw in there too. But those are the 3 biggies. And a lot of people use a lot of dairy in their keto because it makes it easy. Because it's only you can get this high fat to keep your numbers up. It is a lot harder when you cut the dairy. Now, why do we talk about this? Well, there's a few different reasons. So clean sources is number 1. Fat, right? Fat, unless you're a vegan or a vegetarian doing this, you're going to be getting a lot of your fat from animal products. Fish, fowl, beef, pork, whatever. And animals, us or any other animal, stores their toxins in fat. So when you're eating an animal's fat, guess what you're getting? You're getting their toxins. So what would you rather eat? A genetically corn-fed, antibiotic, steroided, growth hormone cow, or a cow that was fed its natural diet of eating grass, not given hormones, antibiotics, and steroids, and wandering around and getting, the pastures? Well, you probably want the latter because you know it's not going to have all that crap in it. And remember, when you genetically modify a food, we'll do a video on genetic modification in the future, but when you genetically modify a food, you've changed its protein structure to be different than something that was ever on this planet. And then once that cow eats that genetically modified corn or feed, the protein that's in there, it uses to make more of it. So now its muscle becomes genetically modified. And then you're going to eat that cow to get its fat or protein to make your protein and then make more of you. So how does that work, right? And again, what are their toxic loads? You don't want to eat those toxins too. A lot of times when I find people can do keto and do crappy, dirty keto, and they may not get the results they're looking for, and they stall because they're eating a lot of crappy sources. I've had so many people reach out to me when we were looking for help and going, I'm doing all the things, I'm hitting my macros and I'm not losing any weight. And I'm looking and they're eating a ton of crap dairy because, again, if you're having dairy, the fats in there are one of the reasons you're doing it. Well, what's going on with your cow that's being milked? Is it giving genetically modified corn, steroids, antibiotics, and hormones, or is it out there, grass, you're eating grass? And again, when you give it grass, you get the healthy fats. When you give it corn, you're going to make unhealthy fats, anti-inflammatory fats in the body. We don't want that. So you are what you eat. Okay, we talk about you already absorb more than that, but yes, you are what you eat. So we got to make sure that we go with clean sources. Same with our vegetables and everything else. So clean sources are very important. So when it comes to beef, like I said, grass-fed, free-range, organic, grass-finished. When we talk about our chickens, we want to go for the fattier part of the chicken, right? We want the fat. Don't go eating the chicken breast. You're going to blow your macros. So go out there and get a chicken thigh, chicken leg, right? Get that fat in, but make sure the chicken's clean. Pasture-raised, non-vegetarian fed. Chickens eat bugs. They're not supposed to be eating wheat and soy, right? That takes their good fats to bad fats. Same thing with the eggs that come out of the chicken. You want pasture-raised, non-vegetarian fed. Otherwise, you take those good, healthy omega-3s that are in eggs and shift them to something that's inflammatory, okay? What about if you're going to have pork, again, organic, uncured, okay? Any kind of meats or cold cuts, uncured. We don't want those nitrites and nitrates. If you're doing fish, you want wild caught, not farm raised. You know what they give a farm raised salmon? They give it corn. I don't know about you, but I've never seen a salmon swim upstream to spawn, avoid the bear, jump out of the water, walk on its hind little fins there, go knock down a piece of corn, shuck it, eat it, jump back in the river and go out. Doesn't work that way. They eat little tiny crustaceans. So why is salmon pink? Well, it's because they eat tiny crustaceans. What do you think happens to salmon that is corn-fed? Well, they're white. So that salmon that you get that's not wild caught, guess what they do to it to make it look pink? Because you don't buy a white salmon. They inject it with a dye because that's healthy for you, right? So, and then if you're getting the genetically modified corn, they're giving it even worse. So again, we're going to stick to our fatty or cold water fish in general because that's where the good healthy fats come from and make sure it's wild caught. So these are definitely some sources of things we need to help get healthier foods. And again, coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, these are the healthy fats. We don't want to have a ton of these inflammatory fats that we can get exposed to also. So hopefully this is making some sense. All right. So let's go back to the lifestyle. So you decide to do a keto diet. All right. Listen, there's 3 different phases in which people go into this burning of fat. And I like to break them down like this. There's ketosis, fat adaptation or keto adapted, and then super keto adapted. That's my own coined phrase from 11 years ago. Go watch my old videos, you'll see. So what is it? So people do this lifestyle shift and they're like, all right, how long until I get into ketosis? Well, everyone's different. You, me, everyone else, we have different exposures in our life. We have different times of our life. We're male, female, what are our hormones, where we are, how 20, 40, 50, heavier, lighter, history of different things. Like there's many different reasons that will make you and me and anyone else have different responses. So it takes time for your body to shift. So the first phase that people have to go through is getting into ketosis. All right. For some people, it can take 24 hours, 48 hours. Some people, it takes a lot longer. Your body can be a little stubborn. It's like, hey, I'm hungry, but there's no, I want Chinese food or pizza, right? But, I look at my cabinets, there's a ton of food, but it's not what I'm looking for. And your body's, you're not eating those foods. Your body keeps saying, well, eat what's in the cabinet. And you keep giving it stuff in the cabinet. It's like, no, I want the pizza. And it keeps waiting. Eventually, it might say, all right, screw it. I'm going to have this thing in this piece of steak that you have over here. I wanted this carb, but you're not giving it to me. Someone may take a couple days to get there. Some may be a whole dirty holdout. Does that make sense? So it takes time for people to get into ketosis. Once you do that, now your body's making ketones. Great. It takes time to make more and more. We talk about these different levels. And then eventually you get to a place where your body's in ketosis, where you have enough there to be used. But how efficient are you? So remember, the body is an amazing adaptive organism. And it will adapt to be more efficient at things it's used to doing. So if you're burning glucose and ketones, different percentages of the time, you get pretty good at both. But if you haven't been burning ketones very long, or at all, basically, because you're born in ketosis. When you're in utero, you're in ketosis. You're born in ketosis. As long as you keep breastfeeding without other interventions in there, you're still in ketosis. Right? Child's brains crave ketones over, they actually prefer it over glucose. That's a different topic for a different day. But we want to be in that state. Our body needs it. Our brains need it. But if you're not doing it for a very long time, it became very efficient at what you gave it. Like you give me glucose, I'm getting good at this. Eventually your body can get bad at it because it keeps seeing insulin for too long. We have the fail point, but in general it gets very efficient. Ketones is like, oh, what's that thing? Oh, I've seen that before. I kind of know what that is. I've heard of it. I've heard of these ketones before, but we haven't seen one in so long. It's like a unicorn, right? But maybe we can burn that for fuel. Maybe we can't. We're going to start, and we're not very efficient. But over time, with exposure, we become more and more efficient at burning our ketones. All right? So over time, we adapt to burning ketones. So just because you're in ketosis doesn't mean you're burning ketones for fuel or not doing it efficiently. It takes time. So how does that happen? Well, exposure. The body needs to learn to use it better. So the more ketones you see over a longer period of time, the quicker you'll adapt. So if your body's only using a small percentage early on because it's not very efficient at it, the more you have, the better you'll do. Because if let's say you're only burning 10% of whatever's there, if you're at 1 millimole or 3 millimoles, the person at 3 millimoles is going to be doing better. So it's also not just about making them, it's about having that elevated level. We'll talk about how we can speed up that process with the thing we mentioned earlier in the way of exogenous ketone. But we got to make sure that our body, it takes time to get there. Now that keto adaptation can take a long time. And it doesn't, everyone's a little bit different. That, usually most people get into ketosis in that first 24 to 48 hours. It's the adaptation that takes time. It could take a week, it could take a couple of weeks. It could take even longer depending on your insulin resistance levels. All right. And then once you're there, great. Now you're doing the thing. You're burning the ketones. You feel amazing. You're sharp. You're locked in. You have good focus. The brain fog's gone away. You have better energy. You're stable throughout the day. You're not having those dips at 3 o'clock in the afternoon where you're getting tired and you're starting to lose some fat and some inches are coming off you. Right? Okay. Well, eventually, let's say you have a bad meal. Well, you might get knocked out of keto. because your body had some carbs and it goes, oh, here we go. And sometimes when you have those carbs, body goes, ooh, now I want them again. The cravings have gone down because you're burning keto for so long. But then when you eat the stuff, sometimes the cravings come back up. You're like, because the body's like, ooh, give me carbs, give me carbs. It thinks food's back, right? But how quickly can you get back into keto? That's really the question. So that's when we call what we call super keto adapted. That's where we're kind of back to our ancestors. That's when we get to a place where we've been burning ketones for long enough that maybe a little bit of a bad meal doesn't always knock us out, or we can get back in much more quickly. Okay? I've been doing this so long. I've been doing keto for 10 years and drinking them that long too, and fasting, that I am really efficient at burning ketones. And even if I knock myself out, which is harder for me to do than maybe other people, I get myself really quickly back in. So an example of how this may or may not work for you is like cyclic keto. People do this cyclic keto. Cyclic keto doesn't work, by the way. So just anyone who's doing that, no, especially if it's early on in your keto journey. And what that is like, hey, I'm going to do keto for 5 days, and on the weekends I'm going to be off, and then I'm going to go back. Well, the research basically shows that that 5 days, it may take you almost to get into ketosis, maybe longer. You eat the crap, you go back out of ketosis, you're burning glucose again, and then it can take you 4 to 5 days to get you even back in. So what are you really doing? You're not really burning anything. Now, if you're truly super keto adapted, you might be able to handle that. But that's just something that happens way later on. Even then, it's not easy for a lot of people. So it's understand that that's what keto adaptation is. Now, measuring keto is important too, because there are 3 different ways you can measure your ketone levels, and they all have their own faults to them. All right? There's blood, urine, and breath. So let's talk about how they all work. Let's talk about the blood first. So when you look in the blood, you can do a blood meter. Keto Mojo is a decent one, where you actually prick your finger and you check your blood, and it tells you how many millimoles of ketones you have. And again, we can look for those levels of what's called nutritional ketosis. Now, that tells you, hey, you're in ketosis. And it'll tell you if you're in a good, sufficient level. But what it doesn't really tell us is if you're efficient yet. All right? So that's where the fault is right there, at least early on. Because I have someone I'm talking with right now that has been doing keto recently. She's definitely getting into ketosis. She's getting 1-2 millimoles on her own, which is amazing. But she's also having blood sugar spikes and having hypoglycemic attack. We'll talk about keto flu in a little bit. But what's going on there? Well, I'm in ketosis. Why is this happening? Well, just because you're making ketones, like I said before, doesn't mean you're efficient at burning them, and doesn't mean your body's not trying to hold out for that glucose. So we can still break it down and make it, but how well are we using it? And the body has 2 things it can do with ketones. Use it or lose it. It's not like, oh, you're giving me ketones, I don't need this, I'm going to shove it back into fat. It doesn't work that way. All right? So when you have ketones in your body, you have 2 options. Like I said, you can use them, burn them for fuel, or lose them. If you lose them, guess what happens? You pee them out. So a lot of people do keto when they first look. They want to know when they're in ketosis. They look at a urine strip. And the darker the strip, the more ketones in the urine. Oh, I'm in ketosis. But that is very early on is helpful, but not helpful later on. So let's say you're just starting keto and you want to know, hey, I want to know if I'm getting in ketosis. Okay, do the things you're doing, get into keto. And when you pee on the strip, if it starts getting darker, you're in ketosis. But what happens when you adapt? When you adapt, guess what will happen? That strip might get lighter. It's not very good at telling you when you're adapted. In fact, if anything, it actually might make you think you're not doing keto right. So you're doing all the things, you're peeing and the keto strips are getting darker. And then all of a sudden it starts to get a little lighter. You're like, oh crap, I must not be doing something right. And you start messing with your food. When all in all, what's happening is you were working, it was doing fine, but you weren't realizing that your body was actually utilizing them better. Okay. So the keto strips early on can be helpful, but long-term will not be telling what you want to tell, because they shouldn't be dark all the time, because that means you're never really burning them enough, or you're getting so high that your body's burning through them. The opposite, though, is your breath meters. So breath meters look for the acetone. They look for that breakdown byproduct of burning ketones. So if you're not efficient early on, a breath meter is not going to really tell you much about being in ketosis, because you're not using them. You could be in ketosis, but then you're blowing on that thing and you're like, it says my ketones are low. Yeah, because you're not burning them very well, right? So a breath meter, I would say, if you're going to use that, I would use it later on in your keto journey, maybe once you know the urine strips aren't as effective. So they all have their detriment. So I kind of like the blood, or at least early on, blood with urine. Not together in a pile or anything, but doing those 2 different types of tests, because you can say, all right, I'm peeing but what's my level inside? How efficient am I making ketones? And then hopefully that number will start to climb inside, and then the P strip will start going down. Then you go, hey, just because I'm making ketones, now you can see I'm not excreting them all. I'm pretty good. I think blood is probably one of the better ways to understand. Now, again, once you achieve ketosis, there's a feeling of it, you know what it's like. And some people don't know, can't always say when they're in it. They can get there and then they feel this difference, and then they know more when they're out of it. Like I was never someone who really feels a lot of things, but when I'm in keto, I feel a certain way. When I'm out, that's when I notice differences. That's when I get a little tired. I might be yawning at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, things like that. That's when I know I'm out. All right. So that's how it works for me. I don't really measure much anymore. I've been doing this so long, I can kind of tell when I'm in or out. And I can do things to mitigate even worrying about that. So that's real helpful in the measuring, because measuring messes people up a lot. So I want to talk also about how you know your goals are getting met, because the scale in keto, my voice almost breaking there, like Peter Brady. So with keto, the scale will lie to you. So there's weight loss and there's fat loss. So weight loss is where you lose everything, all that you are. So your number on that scale will go down. Well, I'm telling you, I don't want to lose my fat. I don't want just my fat. I want to lose just my fat. I don't want to lose my protein. I don't want to lose my mass. I don't want to lose my muscle, right? So weight loss, you might burn everything. That's not actually healthy to do that. Fat loss is different. Fat loss, you're only burning the fat and you're maintaining your muscle and preserving, even growing that muscle. So imagine that you burned 2 pounds of fat, but you're also exercising and you gain 2 pounds of muscle. What do you think the scale is going to say? No change. And you're going to go, well, nothing's working here. The scale doesn't move. Why is it not moving? Well, because your body is recompositing itself. It's not about weight loss, it's about fat loss. And fat weighs less and takes up more space than muscle. So muscle weighs more, but takes up less space. So imagine you lost 2 pounds of fat, but gained 2 pounds of muscle. Well, your inches will shift. So it's really important with keto, not just to look at a scale, but to also look at inches. So yes, if you're 300 pounds and you have to lose weight, you need the scale to go down. It's got to have to go down, but it doesn't go down like this and you lose all that muscle, because then it's really hard to get it back. That's a different conversation too. But it goes down like this kind of, and sometimes you can go up a little bit depending on where you are, and it keeps going down. But as long as your body continues to lose those inches and you start to feel better, that's the recompositing. That's different. I've seen people go from 144 to 148 and they look like completely different people. And a lot of people, well, I got to get to this number. Well, why? Why does that number in the scale so matter? Like, let's say your goal weight is 130 pounds and you're 150 pounds. What if I said to you, well, what if you got to 140, but you look like you're 125? Would you be as upset if the scale didn't move more than you wanted to? You say no, but a lot of people still think about it when they see the scale. But it's important. It's not just about the number on the scale. It's about the mass, about what the density is, what's the composition. All right. So it's really, I like to use a tape to measure in certain areas, on an arm, on a leg, on a belly. And when you can do that, you can actually see changes. And then another thing that's really important is your water intake. And this will kind of bring us into keto flu. When you break down fat, we release those toxins into our body. Our body needs to dilute that. The solution to pollution is dilution. All right? So you need to drink a lot of water. One of the reasons, we'll go the other reason in a minute, while you're on this lifestyle. All right? Because as you're breaking down the fat, you want to dilute those toxins to minimize their impact on you. Number one. So if you're low on water and your body has to hold water and conserve, guess what it does? It holds it under your skin. You can bloat a little bit. So you might think, oh, I didn't lose any weight and I didn't lose an inch. But are you drinking enough water? It's possible you're holding your water. We need to flush that out too. So water is really important. At least 100 ounces a day on this. All right, minimum 6 to 8 glasses, but I like 100 ounces a day is a good place to be. 0.6 times your body weight is another good way to kind of determine how many ounces you need per day. Now, one interesting thing is as you drop insulin out and bring ketones up, that is a natural diuretic effect. Ketones actually help flush water out of the body, and actually as you dump insulin, you dump water and electrolytes. So as you lower this need for glucose, insulin drops too, and you start using ketones, you actually start flushing water and electrolytes. So it's very important to take water coming in and to add electrolytes at least once a day. A good, healthy, low, no sugar electrolyte. So people talk about keto flu, and they talk about, oh, it's because you're water and electrolytes. I'm going to tell you that 98% of that is not the case. Yes, your water and electrolytes can give you some keto flu-like symptoms, all right? And there is a little bit of piece of it about the toxic load. Again, water needs to kind of bend that because you're dropping those toxins, but most of the time it's about blood sugar. So what is keto flu? Well, people start doing keto early on. They hit this wall where they get their blood sugar time drops out is what it feels like. They get tired, fatigue, brain fog, things like that, even some weakness, right? A little lightheaded. Well, you ever have low blood sugar? It's all those things. So the Venn diagram of keto flu and hypoglycemia are very, very overlapping, very minimal, non-touching. Yes, in some instances it can be water and electrolytes and detox, but most of the time it's about your blood sugar. Because what happens is this: early on, your body is still a glucose burner, and you're stealing the glucose, and it takes time to make those ketones, and eventually you do, but you're not efficient. And if you're really someone who's very sensitive to energy levels, your blood sugar might be dropping and your body's not using the ketones enough. Guess what happens? You feel hypoglycemic, and it's called keto flu. All right. Again, we're not discounting the water, electrolytes, and the toxic load, but it's more than likely about your fat, about you're not burning ketones well and your body dropping out its blood sugar. So what's one thing I use to help mitigate that? Ketones. So I'm going to show you a box, but not show you necessarily. So there are ways you can drink ketones. Okay. If you want to know more about that, let me know. I can give you a link of where I get my ketones from, what I prefer. But realize that if I give my body beta hydroxybutyrate, I can increase my level of circulating ketones even while my body's not making enough. And the research shows it doesn't stop your body's making ketones. It's not like, oh, well, if you give it ketones, it won't make it. Nope, that's not true. Okay. And your body doesn't care where it came from, whether it came exogenously or endogenously. It uses it either way as fuel. Okay. There's a lot of old arguments back in the day that people used to make some stupid ones. And what happens is if you increase that level enough, guess what? You give enough fuel that your body, even though it's only burning a small percentage, will be forced to use it. So if you want to mitigate keto flu, make it easier to get into ketosis, make it easier to maintain and adapt quicker, I usually advise people using ketones. So it's a way you can take a supplement and get into ketosis in less than an hour and get that level of ketones up. And should you maybe not hit your macros very well that day, maybe you didn't get enough fat in and you just can't get any more food in, or maybe you had a bad meal. Well, you burn through that you let your body have that glucose surge and crash, and within an hour or two, I would then tell you drink some ketones, put your body right back into ketosis, and get this thing going. I don't like to tell people to use it as a cheat, but it's definitely a helpful piece, especially when you're trying to really figure this out. Especially the vegetarian and vegan keto people, because it's hard for them to get their fats in. All right, so it's a little hack there too. So that's why I really like using ketones, because it really helps to amplify the effect and make it easier to maintain and be in ketosis long term. Should you be doing fasting, it doesn't break your fast. The whole point of a fast is to make ketones. Adding ketones does not break a fast. Adding carbs would break your fast. So those are some things there. So I'm going to go over one more thing, which is fasting, and we'll talk, and then we'll exit this video and say goodbye. This is the kind of stuff I teach all the time. So if you want to learn more about this keto 101 type stuff, here we go. But fasting is the other thing that helps your body make ketones. Well, I don't let anyone that's doing keto with me fast before 2 weeks. And I think fasting is great, because fasting is great for a number of reasons, because it's not just about forcing your body to shift fuel sources on its own, and you can get a much higher level of ketones, but it's about making sure your body's ready for it. Because again, we've talked before, if you can't handle it, especially if you're not doing ketones, your body might drop out too quickly. You will be miserable before your body really turns over to the next level. All right. That's why I don't like starting with that. But fasting is a really helpful tool, because it also helps your body do what's called autophagy. So basically, when the body is in a fasted state, it will kind of clean up the mess, the detritus, the things that have built up over time. Remember, just because we evolved that way, because food sources will come and go, the body is very efficient and it's very smart and it's ingenious in its creation. And it also takes that time to say, okay, this is how we clean up the mess that's been building up over time. Dead senescent cells, it's going to how we pick up like broken pieces of other things that have been there, as well as these immunoglobulins. So when you have foods that you eat repetitively, your body starts to maybe build up a response. This will kind of scavenge that, or any other thing that's getting reactive in the environment, because it's looking for that protein a little bit early on. So we can scavenge that and take any of those reactive things to our environment as well as our food down a little bit as well. So that's why fasting is really helpful. Then there's intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting, here's the big reason why it fails for a lot of people. or it doesn't do what they think it's doing. The point of intermittent fasting is also to put your body into ketosis, to burn fat. That's the point of it. The difference is, how long does it take me versus you versus someone else to actually get into ketosis? And I've always told you, if you're not doing this regularly, if you're just eating a regular lifestyle and not doing a keto diet, intermittent fasting very rarely works for you. Yes, some people have great genetics, it works for them. But some people, again, it can take 24, 48 hours even just to get into ketosis, right? I mentioned that earlier. So even if you're doing a 16, 18-hour fast, are you getting into ketosis? I don't know. You can check your numbers. Or let's say you are getting in there. Let's say you're getting in there after 12 or 14 hours. And then what happens when you go back to eat? Well, if you eat a keto lifestyle, your body's going to be making ketones. Yes, there's calories coming in, but you're making ketones again. You'll continue to make ketones, and then you can go back and do the fast, and it'll work for you. But if you go back to glucose burning and you shift that fuel source right at the glucose, well, you're in ketosis for what? An hour, maybe two, maybe not at all? Well, how do you think that worked for you? And the other problem people find is that they drop their calories too quickly. And when your body sees calories shrinking, all right, especially if you're intermittent fasting, they see the calories shrinking, especially if you're not a fat burner, you're a glucose burner. What happens is the body goes, oh, our food sources are running low. We better hold as long as we can, right? So if you go drop your calories too low early on in keto, that's what I mentioned earlier about if you do the macros on some of these apps, it takes you down way too low too fast. Or you do this intermittent fasting where in that window you eat, you just don't eat enough calories. Your body sees that window and goes, all right, we're fasting. Okay, we're fasting. All right, we're out of food. We're out of food. Good. Oh, we got some food. Okay, so we got a little bit, but it's not enough. And we don't know when the food's going to come. Eventually, winter's coming, and we're not going to have any food. So we better hold everything we can. So we're going to use what we need right away, but we're going to store as much as we can. We're going to hold on. Have you ever seen The Biggest Loser? And I don't even know if it's on anymore. But back in the day, these people were very big, and they go through these crash like lifestyle changes and all these things and whatever. I wasn't a fan, but it is what it is. There'd be these people who were doing really well, and they were like the best. Every week they'd lose the most weight, whatever, they were on the chopping block. And then they'd get up there one day and all of a sudden, boom, they didn't lose any weight, or they gained a pound or two. And then they're like off in the corner crying because they don't know what happened. And it's like, I did everything. I didn't eat anything this week, blah, blah, blah. And you watch Bob or Jillian, they'd always even say you didn't eat enough. Because what happens is if you go too low, too fast, your body holds as much as you can. And sometimes you won't actually lose the weight you want to lose. So it's really important that you get enough calories in early on. And then if you are intermittent fasting and you're not doing keto lifestyle, I would say just don't intermittent fast. I just don't think it's very effective for most people. I personally do all three. I OMAD, I basically eat one meal a day. I will drink ketones at least once or twice a day, and I will do a keto lifestyle with the foods I do eat. And that's how I maintain that level and how I feel. That's not for everybody. Now, here's the cool thing about a keto supplement. All right, a keto supplement does not require you to be doing a keto lifestyle, because there are so many health benefits to ketones out there that are not just about weight loss, that why should you be deprived of those benefits just because you don't feel like or can maintain a keto lifestyle? Well, that's the cool thing about the drinks. So you put them in water, you drink it, and you're in ketosis. Well, the cool thing is you don't have to be, you can get all the health benefits, even the fat burning part of it, the focus, the energy, the weight loss, and the muscle protection aspect without even having to do the lifestyle. You get better results when you do the two together, sure, but they're not a prerequisite to use them. People think, oh, I can't drink those, I'm not doing keto. No. In fact, they're better for people. They're even more so for people who don't do keto, who want the health benefits of ketones. All right? Ketones have been shown in research to lower insulin resistance, to lower leptin resistance, that part of your brain that tells you you're hungry or full. So when that hypothalamus is not listening to leptin, it doesn't tell you you're full, you don't stop eating. It can help improve digestion, helps kill the bad guys in the gut because they like to feed on glucose. It can help with improving thyroid function. It can help with the immune system. It can help with lowering seizure disorders. So the brain loves ketones, especially in a pathophysiological state. So if there's been a head injury, especially then because there's been a metabolism with glucose injury, when there's been concussions, stroke, again, developing children's brains, all these things are great when you have ketones. Ketones help dismantle the NLRP3 inflammasome, this big ball of products that spit out inflammatory products into the body all day long. And now, again, we're supposed to have that and then go away. When that cell danger response gets stuck in an area more than it should be, that's when we keep pumping out these inflammatory cytokines. This helps dismantle it, okay? It actually dismantles it. In fact, they've shown that seizures can be corrected with ketones. Again, I'm not diagnosing, treating, anything like that. I'm telling you what the research is showing. You guys do your own stuff. There's even good studies or evidence that suggests that it can be helpful for cancers. Cancers are fermenters, right? So having ketones in your body, when your body can use that as a fuel, but your body, the glucose, which would starve the cancer, if you take it out, can be a thing. Now, it's not for every cancer. Some cancer, you have to pulse glutamine and things like that. It's a longer story, but there is definitely research out there. Go look at it. All right. And lastly, the powerhouse of your cell, the mitochondria, they use both glucose and ketones to make energy, the ATP. And they are very susceptible to inflammation and free radical damage, oxidative stress, because we use oxygen with our fuel to make the energy. All right. So first of all, when it comes to ketones versus glucose, per carbon molecule of your ketone versus your glucose, you will make more ATP using less oxygen. So what does that mean? When we use oxygen, we can create these things called free radicals. All right. And the body has to scavenge them with antioxidants. Glutathione is a very important antioxidant for doing that. You make less you make less free radicals when you use ketones than you do with glucose. So it's a cleaner burning fuel, making more energy. So it's more efficient. Your body also will make more glutathione when you're in ketosis. So you'll make more antioxidants as well as make a cleaner burning fuel. Win-win. And glutathione is really important for neurological and immunological function. Also, there's been research to show that it actually helps with mitochondrial biogenesis, making new, healthier mitochondria. So it actually triggers your body to make new, healthy powerhouses. All right. It also, because you need less oxygen, you have a lower VO2 max. Or I should say, actually raises your VO2 max. So what does that mean? Further, faster, stronger, longer. People using ketones for fuel can do, especially endurance race athletes, much longer, more easier. They're not cramping up the same. They're not burning lactic acid. That's a glucose thing, right? They're actually more steady state energy. They actually affect more. I will tell you in the gym, it will make you stronger, longer in your gym workout. Because you can't hit that VO2 max. I know people that they'd be on the Orange Theory and they couldn't get to that zone because they were just pumping. Their bodies their oxygen levels wouldn't need to go so high to get them where they needed to go. They actually were more efficient. It's better for altitude. And the coolest thing about being ketosis is that it has been shown to be muscle protective. It only burns fat and actually even anabolic. You can actually even build more muscle in ketosis. So it's a better fuel for building muscle in the gym. All right. Minimizing the breakdown. It's pretty amazing when you look at the research, all the things ketones can help you do. And those mitochondria, those powerhouses of your cell, are really important for a lot of neurological and immunological function. And we've shown that mitochondrial dysfunction is the base for a lot of disease in the body, like these chronic illnesses. And if inflammation and antioxidants destroy them, well, if you can lower inflammation and improve antioxidant capacity, well, why wouldn't ketones be really helpful for all these things? Ketones can even help with heart damage and heart tissue and making the heart more efficient. Ketones also help increase something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I'm going to steal this from another doc. Miracle-Gro for your brain. It basically makes your brain make new pathways and connections. You need this to make the myelin, to make all those other things. So this is why I love ketones. This is why I'll never not have ketones in my life. This is why, at the very least, I'll be drinking them every day until you pry them out of my cold, dead hands many, many years from now. And there's also great research out there how it helps with longevity. It helps with telomere lengthening. These are amazing things that this is why we like keto. So I know I gave you a lot of information today. The one thing I will say, and this is what you'll get the poo-pooers out there, is about diabetic ketoacidosis. Ketones in the keto diet do not cause this. Okay? What happens is this. When your body has uncontrolled diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2, the blood sugar spikes. All right? And it can't get in the cell because either we're not making insulin or the cells are deaf to insulin, or even both. Type 1s can also be type 2s over time. So the cells are starving amidst plenty. And eventually, after a while, when that's out of control, the body goes, we need fuel. And it has an overdump of ketones from the liver, meaning it dumps a ton of fatty acids from the fat into the liver, and we have this huge spike of ketones on top of high levels of glucose. Those two factors are not good. And we're talking 15, 20, 25 millimoles of ketones. You're not getting that nutritionally. 4, 5, even 10. No one's getting. It's very hard to get there on your own, but you're not doing this through nutritional lifestyle. You're not doing this from drinking them. You're not going to cause any of these things. And if you are going to do keto and you have a diabetic history, obviously talk with your doctor. One of the things that they look at to see if your diabetes is getting out of control is they look at your blood ketone levels. Because what can happen is if your body is a glucose burner and you're not getting in the cells and then you have ketones, it means there's a problem, diabetic ketoacidosis. But if you do what we're talking about here and doing keto lifestyle, you're doing it on purpose. So ketones are not the disease of diabetics. It is the marker they use to tell you if you're going the wrong way with your diabetes management. It will no longer be a good indicator anymore if you do a keto lifestyle. So let's understand that. And again, if you are using medications and things like that to help support your type 1 or type 2 diabetes and you do keto, you may have to modulate those things because you will not have as much glucose. You may need the other things to help modulate your support for your insulin levels. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope you kind of understand what a ketone is, what the benefits are, what the pitfalls in the diet can be. I do go through a lot more in depth this personally one-on-one if people need this, but I thought this would be a great place to just give you a lot of good information about keto. You could take this information right now and go out there and have an amazing keto journey. If you need help, reach out. But otherwise, have an amazing and healthy day. Dr. Ketone out.